All right, let's jump right into it. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the world of Tyrannosauridae. And yeah, I know what you're thinking, T-Rex, big teeth, tiny arms. But trust me, there's a whole lot more to these dinos than just their superstar T-Rex.
You're absolutely right. Tyrannosauridae ruled the roost for millions of years. But their story isn't just about brute force, it's about evolution, it's about adaptation, and yeah, it's about some seriously cool creatures.
Okay, so no more holding back. What are we talking about? Feathered dinos? I mean, were there vegetarian T-Rexes roaming around? Give me the scoop.
Well, maybe not vegetarian T-Rexes, but feathers. Oh, yeah, definitely feathers. And their story begins way back in the Jurassic period. We're talking about 167 million years ago. Back then, the earliest Tyrannosauridae, they weren't the giants we usually picture.
So like the Chihuahua version of T-Rex.
Exactly. Small, maybe even a bit goofy looking. And get this, some of them even had feathers.
Oh, for real. Feathers. Okay, so who are we talking about here? Which dinos were rocking the feathery look?
Well, there's Proceratosaurus and Guanlong. They were early members of the Tyrannosaur family, and yeah, they were strutting around with feathers. Oh, and they also had these awesome crests on their heads.
Crests. So even back then, they were all about style. But how did they go from small and feathery to, well, the massive, terrifying predators we usually think of?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's a story of evolution playing out over millions of years. You see, those early Tyrannosauridae, they weren't the top dogs just yet. They were sharing the world with other big predators, like the Carcharodontosaurids.
Well, the Carcharodontosaurs, those were like the rivals, right?
Exactly. Think of them as the other big bads on the prehistoric block. Massive, powerful predators, calling the shots across much of the planet during the early Cretaceous. But there was this one area, the Yixian Formation in China, where the climate was a bit, well, unpredictable.
Unpredictable, what do you mean?
I'm talking swings, warm and humid one minute, cold and dry the next. Not exactly a walk in the park, even for a dinosaur.
That sounds rough. So how did our Tyrannosaur buddies handle that roller coaster weather?
Well, it seems like the Carcharodontosaurids, they weren't big fans of the fluctuating climate. But you know what they say? When one door closes, another one opens. And that's where a very special tyrannosaur comes in, Yutyrannus.
Yutyrannus. Okay, that name definitely sounds like a heavyweight. What's the story there?
This is where things get exciting. Yutyrannus was big, about 8.5 meters long, but hold on because here's the twist. It was covered in feathers.
Wait, what? A giant, fluffy Tyrannosaur. That's not what I pictured at all.
I know, right? And we know this because of the amazing fossils from the Yixian Formation. Those feathers, they probably helped keep Yutyrannus warm during those cold snaps.
So even fearsome predators need to bundle up sometimes. I guess that makes sense.
And Yutyrannus wasn't alone. Another Proceratosauridae, Tyrannus, was also hanging out in the same region. And get this, it was even bigger than Yutyrannus, over 9 meters long. These early tyrannosaurs, they were showing their potential, adapting to different environments, and yes, setting the stage for their future dominance.
Okay, so they were toughing it out, making a name for themselves. But hold on, didn't you mention Tyrannosaurs being found all over the world, not just in the Northern Hemisphere?
You're right. For a long time, people thought they were a Northern Hemisphere crew, but then boom, discoveries in Australia and South America turned that idea upside down. That's how we ended up with the group Pantyrannosauria. It's like the big umbrella term, including pretty much all Tyrannosauridae except for those early feathered friends, the Proceratosauridae.
Okay, Pantyrannosauria, I got it. So these globe-trotting tyrannosaurs, what were they like? Were they still rocking the feathers?
Well, one of the earliest members, Aviatyrannus, was tiny, like really tiny, only about a meter long, kind of like the grandma of the Tyrannosaurs. And then there's DeLong, found in the same Yixian formation as Yutyrannus. And guess what? Feathers. It seems like those early Tyrannosaurs, they just couldn't resist the fluffy look.
Feathers. Feathers everywhere.
Yeah.
But they weren't exactly the giants we know yet, right? More like the up-and-comers.
You got it. They were adapting, they were evolving, but they were waiting for their chance to really take over. And that chance came with a major shakeup in the dinosaur world. It's called the Cenomanian-Turonian extinction event.
Ooh, an extinction event. Sounds like things are about to get really interesting.
Oh, it was a game changer for sure. This event caused sea levels to rise, which messed with fossil preservation a bit. But thankfully, we still have some key players from that period who tell us a lot about how tyrannosaurs were evolving.
All right, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
Who are these mystery dinos?
We're talking about Timurlengia and Zuchikintyranus. Timurlengia, found in Uzbekistan, was strutting around about 90 million years ago. And scientists, using those high-tech CT scans, peered inside its skull and found something amazing. Its brain and inner ear were already very similar to those of later, more advanced tyrannosaurs.
So they were getting smarter even before bulking up. Brains before brawn.
It seems that way. And then there's Zuching tyrannus, a much larger tyrannosaur from China, also from around 90 million years ago. It had these significantly narrowed metatarsals, those are the bones in the feet, which meant they could support more weight.
Ah, so Zuching Tyrannus was already showing signs of becoming a heavyweight champ, prepping for the big time.
You got it. Before these discoveries, it seemed like tyrannosaurs just suddenly became apex predators around 80 million years ago. But Timurlengia and Zecantyrannus, they show us that the transition was already happening earlier, between 90 and 80 million years ago. They were evolving those key features: bigger brains, stronger bodies, getting ready to rise to the top.
Wow, this is incredible. It's like we're watching the Tyrannosaur family tree unfold, with all its twists and turns. But I have a feeling this is just the beginning, right? Where do we go from here?
Well, next we're heading into the era of the Eutyrannosaurs, the powerful tyrannosaurs. And that's when things get truly epic. We're talking about the giants, the apex predators, the dinos that ruled the late Cretaceous.
Bring on the giants. I can't wait to hear all about these powerful Tyrannosaurs.
Okay, so let's get into it. The Eutyrannosaurs. The powerful tyrannosaur, you could say they were like the VIPs of the tyrannosaur world.
So this is it then, huh? The big leagues. The Tyrannosaurs that rule the late Cretaceous.
You got it. We're talking massive predators, dominating landscapes all across Asia and North America from about 80 million years ago onward. They had it all, those powerful legs, the massive skulls, and of course those famously tiny arms.
Can't talk about Tyrannosaurs without those arms, right? It's like they skipped arm day for, like, millions of years.
Yeah. It's a mystery for sure, keeps paleontologists guessing. But hey, let's focus on what made these Eutyrannosaurs so successful. I mean, they were perfectly adapted to prey on those big herbivores of their time, like the ceratopsians and hadrosaurs.
Ceratopsians, hadrosaurs, those are the ones with the horns and frills and the duck-billed dinos, right?
Exactly. And here's something interesting. Back when those giant long-necked sauropods were around, tyrannosaurs weren't the top dogs yet. But when the sauropods started to decline, well, that opened up a spot for tyrannosaurs to step in, take over, become the apex predators.
It's like they were waiting for their moment to shine.
Yeah.
So they had the size, the power, and the perfect prey. But you mentioned some differences even within these giants. So what made them stand out from each other?
Oh yeah, they weren't just T-Rex clones. First up, the Albertosaurinae. That includes Gorgosaurus and Albertosaurus. These guys, they had prominent brow horns and a sleeker build compared to other tyrannosaurs.
Sleeker, so they weren't all about brute force then? Like, were they the marathon runners of the Tyrannosaur family?
Interesting analogy. They were definitely still powerful predators. But yeah, their build suggests more agility. Maybe they were faster, targeting smaller or quicker prey that the bulkier tyrannosaurs couldn't catch.
Ah, so different hunting styles, different strategies, a whole predator lineup. What about those long-snouted tyrannosaurs you talked about earlier? The Alioramini. They sound like the oddballs of the family.
They definitely stand out. Most famous example, Yansosaurus, lived in China about 72 to 66 million years ago. And its skull, super long and slender, earned it the nickname the Pinocchio Tyrannosaur.
Okay, the long-nosed Tyrannosaur, that's a new one. So what was up with that snout? Just for looks, or was there a reason for it?
Well, there are a few theories floating around. Some scientists think that long snout with all those extra teeth was perfect for catching fish or smaller prey. Imagine them wading through rivers, snatching up fish like giant herons.
Whoa, that's a wild thought. So maybe they were more specialized hunters, filling a different role in the ecosystem.
Exactly. It shows that even within the Eutyrannosaurs, there was a whole range of adaptations and feeding strategies. But we can't forget about the real heavy hitters now, can we? The ones that truly embody that classic Tyrannosaur image.
You're talking about the giants.
Yeah.
The ones that still give us goosebumps thinking about them.
You know it. Tarbosaurus, Zeuthentyrannus, and of course, the one and only Tyrannosaurus rex. The apex predators of their ecosystems, taking down the largest herbivores.
Yeah, those are the household names.
Yeah.
But even though they were all massive and powerful, they weren't exactly identical, right?
You're right. They had a lot in common, but there were subtle differences, like their skull shapes, the size and proportions of their limbs, even the number and arrangement of their teeth. Like Tarbosaurus from Mongolia and China, it had a slightly narrower skull and longer arms than Tyrannosaurus rex.
So even at the top, there was room for variation. Like they were each fine-tuned for their specific environments.
Exactly. And then there's Zuching tyrannus, another massive tyrannosaur from China. It had a very deep skull and large teeth, which suggests it might have been a bone-crushing specialist.
Like they were always evolving, trying out different variations to see what worked best.
And that brings us to the king, Tyrannosaurus rex, the most complete, the most studied tyrannosaur we have. And those massive jaws, it's become an icon.
Yeah, T-Rex is a legend.
Hmm.
But what about its bite force? With those jaws, it must have been a bone-crushing machine.
You're telling me, get this, studies suggest Tyrannosaurus rex could exert a bite force of up to 35,000 newtons.
35,000 newtons. That's like the weight of 3 small cars. I guess that explains the bone-crushing part. But how do scientists even figure that out? Is it just based on the size of their teeth?
It's more than just tooth size. Scientists use all sorts of techniques, biomechanical modeling, analyses of skull structure. They even look at bite marks on fossilized bones. It's like detective work, but with fossils.
That's amazing. So it's not just guesswork. There's real evidence behind that incredible bite force. What about those other tyrannosaurs, like Tarbosaurus and Zucheng tyrannus? Did they pack the same punch?
Well, they weren't quite on the same level as Tyrannosaurus rex, but they were still formidable biters. Tarbosaurus, it could generate a bite force of about 10,000 newtons. And Zucheng tyrannus might have been even stronger, maybe around 15,000 newtons.
So even the smaller giants were forces to be reckoned with. But here's a question that's always bugged me. Were tyrannosaurs just mindless killing machines? Or were they smarter than we give them credit for?
Great question, and one that's still being debated. For a long time, people thought dinosaurs were, well, not too bright. But new research is challenging that idea, especially when it comes to tyrannosaurs.
So they weren't just all brawn and no brains.
Not necessarily. Studies of their brain cases suggest they had relatively large brains for their body size, especially compared to other dinosaurs. And their brains show some interesting features, like enlarged olfactory bulbs, which means they had a killer sense of smell.
So maybe they weren't winning any spelling bees, but they could sniff out a meal from miles away.
Exactly. Their brains also had well-developed areas for vision and hearing, so they were super alert, very aware of their surroundings. They were sensory powerhouses, perfectly equipped to track down and catch prey.
Like they were born to be predators, with all the senses and brain power they needed. But what about their social lives? Lone wolves? Or did they hang out in groups?
Now, that's a fascinating question, and one that's still being explored. There's some evidence that tyrannosaurs might have had some level of social complexity. For example, some fossil sites have turned up multiple tyrannosaur skeletons of different ages, so maybe they lived together.
Ooh, a tyrannosaur family gathering.
Yeah.
But were they actually cooperating, like hunting together? Or
Yeah.
just tolerating each other?
That's the tricky part. We don't have solid proof of pack hunting like we see in wolves, but there are some interesting clues, like healed bite marks on tyrannosaur bones, which could mean they fought with each other, maybe competing for food or mates.
So it wasn't just roaring and chomping. Maybe there was some social drama going on in those tyrannosaur groups.
It's definitely possible. But as with a lot of things in paleontology, we need more research to get a clearer picture of their social lives. The fossil record only tells us so much. But with every new discovery, we get closer to understanding these incredible creatures.
This is mind-blowing. It's like we're slowly uncovering the secrets of these creatures, more complex, more nuanced than we ever imagined. And I have a feeling there's so much more to learn.
You're absolutely right. The world of tyrannosaurs is full of surprises, and every new discovery helps us appreciate these magnificent creatures.
Yeah.
They once ruled our planet.
It really is amazing how much our view of tyrannosaurs has changed. I mean, we used to think of them as these lone wolf giants, just lumbering around. But now we're seeing them in a whole new light. All those complex senses, their potential social lives. It's fascinating.
It shows you how paleontology is always moving forward. New discoveries, new technologies, they keep challenging what we thought we knew. And speaking of changes, one of the most incredible things about tyrannosaurs is how much they transformed as they grew up.
You're talking about those growth spurts, right? I mean, talk about a growth spurt. They went through some crazy change.
It was like puberty on fast forward. They start out small, maybe a little awkward looking, but then they hit their teenage years and boom, hundreds of pounds of growth every year. Their skulls, their bodies, everything changes. They develop those powerful jaws, those massive legs, and yeah, well, those tiny arms.
So like from awkward teen to star athlete in just a few years.
That's a great way to put it. And that transformation, it tells us a lot about their role in the ecosystem. As juveniles, they probably live very different lives than the adults. They might have hunted smaller prey, stayed out of the way of those bigger predators, and maybe even relied on their speed and agility to survive. But as they grew, they climbed the food chain until they became the apex predators we've been talking about.
So different roles at different stages,
Yeah.
helping to keep the ecosystem in balance. It's like those teenage years were a training ground, getting them ready for the big leagues.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. And that journey from hatchling to apex predator, it's just one of the things that makes tyrannosaurs so captivating.
Absolutely. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Feathers, brains, bite force, social lives, even growth spurts. So what stands out to you? What's the most surprising or significant thing about tyrannosaurs?
For me, it's the diversity. Yeah, we tend to focus on those giants, but their story goes back millions of years. And there's this whole range of adaptations. Those small, feathery ancestors, those massive, bone-crushing behemoths. It reminds us that evolution is always experimenting. Even the most successful predators, they never stop adapting, never stop evolving.
Well said. And the fact that we're still learning so much about them, new discoveries always changing the game. It's exciting.
Exactly. The world of tyrannosaurs is full of surprises. Who knows what amazing discoveries are waiting for us out there?
That's a great note to end on. So to everyone listening, keep your eyes peeled for new discoveries. Keep your minds open to new ideas. And never stop exploring this incredible world of dinosaurs. Until next time, happy digging.